Baruchot habaot, ladies. Thank you so much for coming out just before Shabbat. First of all, I hope that everybody has had an amazing, enjoyable, and happy Chag, especially to the viewers who are logging on Torah anytime. We all wish you, first of all, a good year, a happy year, besorot tovot, yeshuot v'nechamot, and we should all go into this year with a new vibe, with new resolutions, and with hope for a better year and for the upcoming final and ultimate simcha, which is the simcha of the redemption and Mashiach coming Be'ezat Hashem. I just want to make a quick announcement that Be'ezat Hashem, starting next week, we will begin a series on the beauty of Shabbat. For those of you that are interested, and for those of you who want to log on and also forward to your friends the news, it's going to be a 5-6 week class on the beauty of Shabbat, the secrets of Shabbat. It's not necessarily going to take place every single week, because there are weeks that we're going to be studying the Parshat, but in general you should know that we are going to start a series about Shabbat Kodesh. There's a lady who wrote into me with a question saying that there are a lot of times that she doesn't feel the kedusha and the happiness and the aura of Shabbat, and she wants to know maybe if she would learn about the Shabbat, not just halachot, but hashkafa, learning about the intricacies of Shabbat and its fundamentals, maybe she would feel more attached and connected to that day. So I promised her that Be'ezat Hashem, after the Chagim, we're going to start these classes, and I hope that you all will tune in and enjoy them. Let us begin. This week's parasha is Breishit. We're going back to the beginning of the Torah HaKadosha and learning all of the new chidushim and nuances. And as you know, Parashat Breishit may just be one of the most difficult parashiot in the entire Torah. There are books and volumes of manuscripts just on this parasha, hundreds and hundreds of books. And would you believe that although the Chachamim delve into the depths and mysteries of Breishit, this parasha is also taught to little children in kindergarten. Now, of course, when our teachers taught it to us, when we were little, we had no doubts, there were no speculations, and we accepted what was told to us. We accepted the idea that God created the heavens and the earth. But as we grew older and advanced to a higher level of learning, like when we went to college, sadly, the same pasuk that was the foundation of our education suddenly became complicated, controversial, and even questionable. How sad it is when something that we once believed to be true suddenly becomes the thing that we doubt and we struggle with in life or on the college campuses. Suddenly we challenge the very fabric of our existence and who brought this world into being. Suddenly the fundamental aspect of our faith, of our religion, which is to believe that Hashem is the one who created the world, becomes questionable and debated. And when the foundation of your faith is filled with uncertainty, that's when the spiritual decline commences and you begin to fall deeper and deeper into the darkness and doubt of confusion. That being said, since we just finished the last parasha in the Torah, I want to point out that the last word in the Sefer Torah is the word Yisrael, while the first word that begins the Torah is Breishit. And Chachamim spent a lot of time trying to connect the last word in the Torah to the first word in the Torah, because our Torah is read as a continuous cycle. when we finish reciting the last words of the Torah on Simchat Torah, and we say, Le'einei kol Yisrael, we immediately say the words, Breishit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. There's no pause between the last words of the Torah and the first words of Breishit. Jews never finish learning. Our learning is a continuous learning. You see, we don't want the Satan to assume that when we recite the last words in the Torah, that's it, we're done. That we closed the Sefer Torah and we moved on to other matters in life. That's also a lesson of life, by the way. Just because you end one chapter doesn't mean it's over. And that's why we begin Bereshit immediately upon concluding the entire Sefer Torah. But the Rabbanim want to know what the connection is between the last word in the Torah and the first word. Now, there are many interpretations that were given to us, but today we're going to discuss just one simple point which is taught to us by the Rambam, alav shalom. And he centers his answer based on something that Shlomo HaMelech, alav shalom, once said. What did he say? He said, Ha'elokim asa et ha'adam yashar. Shlomo HaMelech said that God created man, specifically the Jew, straight, yashar. What does that mean? It means that Hashem created us with a mind that can deduce things logically. What makes sense to you logically? With a mind that has an understanding of things, where if a person really thinks about things, he will come to the proper conclusions. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the ability to understand things on a rational level, says Shlomo HaMelech. He gave us the ability to use our minds to arrive at the correct decisions of life. Ha'elokim asa et ha'adam yashar. But what happens often? Vehem bikshu hashbonot rabim. But people confuse themselves all the time. And all of a sudden, what's referred to as sechel yashar, thinking straight, becomes distorted thinking. When little children first go to their yeshivot, their minds are very pure. They have a sechel yashar. Little kids understand that there is a creator. They understand and accept all the principles of faith in a very pure way and without any hesitation or doubt. But when they progress to a higher level of learning and they move on to study in various colleges, they're introduced to professors who aren't necessarily men of faith, or worse, they're atheists. Suddenly, they're confronted with a society that's conflicting concerning the Creator, and the talk is centered around the theory of evolution and the Big Bang theory, and all of these theories have one thing in common, and that's that HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't at all part of the equation. All of a sudden, that Jew who once had a sechel yashar is influenced by society, and his mind becomes warped and distorted. You see, this is happening in our very own communities, where kids who are on the right path of emunah at some point suddenly veer off the straight path and their faith is weakened. It happens to adults as well. Therefore, it's our obligation to redirect these people's minds back to their original sechel yashar. And that's why the Jewish people are called Yisrael. Why is our nation called Yisrael? Because the first three letters of the name Yisrael is Yashar. And the last two letters spells the name of God, El. Yashar El. Hashem created Am Yisrael with straightness and with an understanding that when it comes to the principles of Judaism, the mind can accept it, the mind can absorb it. Am Yisrael are called Ma'aminim B'nei Ma'aminim, We're not only believers, we're the children of believers. If we trace our lineage back, we arrive at Avraham Avinu alav shalom, who was a man that was surrounded by a multitude of atheists who denied the existence of God. Avraham's spiritual gene of emunah was passed down to his children and children's children. That's the Yashar El. And the first principle in this straight line of thinking, which a person must accept, is Breishit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. If you want to test your mind to determine if it's still Yashar, the test is, do you believe in Breishit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz? Is this something you doubt, or is it something that's undeniable? If it's something that you know as a fact in your mind, then Baruch Hashem, you're still Yashar El. You're still walking along the straight path in your mind, just as your forefathers did before you. You haven't been corrupted. But all these concepts that were simple to us when we were young are slowly being lost because the tumah out there is so strong. And even if a person isn't in such a place that's filled with tum'ah, but just the fact that we live in Eretz Ha'amim, in foreign lands in the Galut, it can cause us to have questions concerning our faith. So many people are dealing with questions of faith in this generation, questions their ancestors before them never had. We're no longer seeing the Yashar El, because so many of us are veering off the straight path and into a world of doubt. Therefore, the Torah's starting point is Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. You have to accept the fact that God created the world. If you can't accept that fact, then you cannot proceed forward, because this is the foundation of the entire Torah. So the Abarbanel alav shalom asks, who wrote this first pasuk of Bereshit? What do you mean, who wrote this first pasuk? Who wrote the entire Torah? We know that the Torah was dictated by God to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a divine manuscript. But the Abarbanel makes a very interesting observation. He writes that the first pasuk of the Torah should have read, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. You see, every pasuk where HaKadosh Baruch Hu dictates to Moshe Rabbeinu begins with the words, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, and God spoke to Moses saying, Daber el bnei Israel ve'amarta alehem. Speak to the Jewish people and tell them. Obviously, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't write this pasuk of Bereshit all on his own. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him exactly which words to write and which words to begin the entire Sefer Torah with. So why doesn't the first pasuk in the Torah begin with the words, and Hashem told Moshe, saying, tell Bnei Yisrael, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz? It's a good question. And the Abarbanel provides us with a very strong answer that I hope will give all you women and girls some chizuk in this very confusing and conflicting generation. He writes that there are two reasons that we believe in the creation of the world. There's a reason that we don't believe that this world just came into existence all on its own. We don't believe in random acts or coincidences. Now, somebody like Charles Darwin came along, and with a very straight face, he wrote that the world began from nothing and that there was no creator. He wrote that life came into existence from non-life. It's very hard to explain it, but it's as simple as you just heard. And his theories became so popular that years later, when a college professor teaches Darwin's theories, he sounds very authoritative. Suddenly all these scientific terms like evolution and selection deter you from the truth. Because what does it mean when you say that life was created from non-life? Well, in the secular world, it means that a bunch of molecules came about. And by the way, Darwin never explains how these molecules came into existence to begin with. Interestingly, every time these scientists run into the issue of explaining how these substances came into being, they always say, oh, that's still left to be determined. We're still working on it. They don't know where all these original elements came from, bichlal. But we do know. It's called the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Anyhow, Darwin claims that the various molecules came together in one arbuvia, like a chunt, and eventually it began to form things. Who formed them? Oh, well, it all happened by itself. By itself. If someone comes along and pours chemicals into a mixture and leaves it there for 100 years, 500 years, will it turn into a field filled with life-sustaining vegetation? If you give a child various baking ingredients, will he be able to produce a 7-layer cake just by throwing all the ingredients into a bowl and leaving it there? You know how ridiculous this sounds? Such an intricate world could not have evolved from a few molecules coming together and forming themselves into this sophisticated, intricate, and inspiring world. But Darwin believed that this world evolved all by itself without a creator. He claims that the lower species that evolved from these molecules after millions of years, they eventually turned into higher species and so on and so forth. And eventually the weaker species died out. This is his Walt Disney theory, by the way. It's got to be Walt Disney because you have to have a very big imagination in order to come up with these shtuyot. So you should know that the believers of the theory of evolution, they have a lot of faith in their belief system. Because obviously if you believe in their theory, then you don't need to abide by any formal laws or statutes. You don't have to worry about Gan Eden or about Gehenna. You're free to do whatever you want. And for some people out there, that idea of having total freedom without any repercussions, that idea is very alluring, is very attractive. These evolutionists will do whatever they can to keep God away from the equation. You know, there was once an ad in a train that had a close-up of a gorilla. You know, mamish see his face close up, and the caption read, "Come to the Bronx Zoo and visit your relatives." And underneath it, it read, "Is that you, Uncle Ernie?" Could you imagine sitting on the train and looking at this gorilla and being told it's your uncle? Is it any wonder that people behave like behemoth, like animals? Darwin was telling the world that a human being is the evolved species of the ape. You're just a sophisticated behemoth. But I wanted to share with you today a certain principle called the honeycomb conjecture. A conjecture means that there's an idea that was never proven. So there was a conjecture that was brought up about 2,000 years ago by a Roman officer named Varro. Varro came up with an idea that he felt was true, but he had a difficult time proving it. Later on in history, other scientists and mathematicians proved his theory to be correct. What was his conjecture? Well, let's first give you a quick lesson on bees and how they work. In a nutshell, a honeybee extracts the nectar from a flower and he brings it to the honeycomb. The honeycomb itself is made up of hundreds of cells that are made out of wax, which the bees construct as well. Now, eventually, and through a certain process, the nectar turns into honey. It's then sealed with wax, at which point the beekeeper removes the honeycomb in order to break through the wax so he can extract the honey. It's an amazing process to watch. But what bothered Varro was that when he looked at the honeycomb, he noticed the odd shape. He realized that every honeycomb that he looked at was the shape of a hexagon. A hexagon has 6 sides. So Varro wondered why the bee dafka chose this shape in order to construct its honeycomb. And that was something that he confirmed, by the way, because he traveled all over the world, and wherever he was, he realized that honeybees always choose the hexagon as the shape for their honeycomb. So one of the things he immediately concluded, obviously, was that this process is ingenious, because by making a hexagon, there are no gaps that are left between the hexagon cells, which means that you're able to make each of the combs right next to each other without forming any gaps between them, which is something that they wouldn't be able to do if, let's say, the cells were made out of circles. If you have a circle and then another circle next to it underneath, there's always going to be gaps between the circles. And what that means is that by making the honeycomb into hexagonic cells, you could fit many of them without having to waste any space. That was his immediate conclusion. But then he realized that there were 2 other shapes in geometry that could serve the same purpose. What are those shapes? The square and the triangle. So he wondered why the bees didn't choose a square or a triangle to form their honeycomb. And his conclusion was his conjecture, his theory. What was the conjecture? He realized that by making a hexagon, it will cost the bee the least amount of wax. Wax is expensive for a bee. A bee has to eat at least 8 ounces of honey in order to make 1 ounce of wax. So Varro decided that this was the bee's cheapest solution, to make it out of hexagons. In addition to which, the hexagon shape could probably hold the most honey than any other shape. That was his conjecture. Now, he wasn't a mathematician, nor could he prove his theory, but he felt that there couldn't be another explanation for why the bee would choose this shape. Later on, another scientist came along, and regarding the honeycomb, he said the following, and I quote, "The honeycomb is absolutely perfect in economizing labor and wax. It is a masterpiece in engineering." Now, if I were to ask you to draw a hexagon, most of you would have a very difficult time drawing it if it was your first time. Your hexagon wouldn't come out so perfect. So I ask you a simple question. How does a bee know how to create a hexagon shape? You're a human being and you could barely get it right, and this bee creates a hexagon. Not only is it a hexagon, it's a perfect 6-sided hexagon. Every side is perfectly equal to the other sides. These bees are continuously producing these hexagons, and the hexagons are made out of wax. Can anyone here tell me how they do that? I'm going to tell you something else. If I blindfolded you and asked you to sign your name on a piece of paper, you'd also have a hard time. Your signature would probably come out a little crooked or lopsided. even though you signed your name thousands of times in your life. So could you imagine if I asked you to draw a hexagon on a piece of paper with a blindfold on? You wouldn't be so successful. But do you know that in a beehive, it's dark? Bees don't have flashlights that they can use to light up their work environment. That means that all these bees are working in the dark. And what are they producing in the dark? Perfect hexagons. How are they able to do this? Well, Darwin says that in the confusion of all those molecules coming together and evolving, this was one of the results. You know what he called that result? It's a big chutzpah on his part, what he said, but you know what he calls it? Simple instinct. This is simple. This is simple. It's anything but simple. This is something so sophisticated and so intricate that even Varro the Roman marveled at the ingenuity of the bee and its honeycomb. And the chutzpah Darwin comes along and he says, it's simple instinct. Mr. Darwin, where does the bee's instinct come from? Can all this really happen by itself? Can the bees possess this knowledge all on its own? Ladies, the honeycomb is proof that there must be a creator, and it's Hashem who created the instinct in the bee to shape his masterpiece. No child learns to speak clearly or knows how to write without someone infusing him with knowledge. Someone infused the spider with the knowledge of how to spin its web. That someone is Borei Olam. And the Abarbanel stresses the point that we're supposed to believe that this world was created by a Kadosh Baruch Hu, not because it says so in the Torah, but rather because it's the only logical conclusion that you could draw if you examine this beautiful world in all its details and intricacy. You don't need professors or even rabbis to come along and tell you that God created the world. The Abarbanel says that you, all by yourself, without teachers, without rabbis, you can draw that conclusion based on what your eyes behold. That's why the Torah doesn't begin with the words, Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, Breishit bara Elokim. I believe that Hashem created the world because God told it to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu is a big rabbi, and he told it to me, and I believe him? No. The Abarbanel says, even if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't tell you that Hashem created the world, it's something you could deduce all on your own. You don't need a Moshe Rabbeinu to use your sechel yashar and determine that this world was created by the master of the universe. That's also the reason the Torah ends with the words Le'einei kol Yisrael, because it should be obvious to the eyes of Bnei Yisrael as they observe the world around them that it's God who created this world. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Ladies, every painting has an artist. Every book has an author. Every building has a builder. Every musical piece has a composer. Hashem is the creator of this entire world and everything in it. I pray that we should all go back to the ultimate sechel yashar that we all possessed when we were little children, pure and filled with faith. I pray that we proceed forward into the new year on a straight path of thinking that will fortify our emunah and build strong walls of resistance against the enemies of Hashem. Yehi Ratzon, that the unwavering emunah of generations past should envelop you and guide you You should merit to see with your own eyes the wonders and miracles of God that He reveals to you on a daily basis, and know without a doubt that Breishit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. May the opening words of the Torah HaKadosha provide you with faith, with strength, and with pride. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Mevorach, and the beginning of a wonderful new year. Amen Ken, Yehi Ratzon.